Hello and welcome to I Want to Fight Araki, a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure close analysis podcast. I'm Thomas,
I'm Emily.
and hopefully you're listening to this because we're trying out a new recording setup.
Boy,
Um, quite a lot of plot stuff to break down, and one or two theme things to break down. Why don't we just get right into the summary of Season 1, Episodes 19, 20, and 21, Battle Tendency, Episodes 10, 11, and 12. I believe that's right, hopefully. Anyway, let's just jump right into the summary. So, Von Stroheim and Cars begin to fight it out as the cabin the Joe Bros were using as a hideout is destroyed. Von Stroheim in the fight shows off all the new functions of his cybernetic body, including moving his limbs in impossible ways and utilizing a machine gun implanted into his chest. Cars is even caught off guard to the point where Von Stroheim is able to rip off one of Cars' fingers. Cars and Von Stroheim's battle eventually leads outside, where Cars displays his unique powers. His bone blades are actually covered in polished claws that can be rotated, but also, because of their polish, can refract to light. While von Stroheim was able to defend himself from Kars' basic attacks, he is chopped in half by Kars' chainsaw. Just as Kars secures the Red Stone of Aja from von Stroheim, the Nazi Major shows off another ability of his, a small cannon located in his eye that fires UV rays. This causes Cars to drop the stone as he and Jojo race for it as it slides down a hill towards a cliff. Jojo initially takes the lead, but as Cars can afford to go all out, Cars takes over. Cars manages to grab the stone as he tumbles over the cliff, but Jojo has planned for that and kicks some snow into Cars' face, causing the Pillar Man to drop the stone for Jojo to catch. Cars isn't out of the battle yet, as he reveals his feet also possess blades, and he's able to grab Jojo with it as the two fall. Jojo manages to use some Hamon to attach himself to an icicle, but the fix is only temporary. As the two fall further, Cars kicks Jojo into a wall and attempts to kill him, but is stopped as Jojo uses the stone as a shield. With Cars caught off guard, Jojo uses the opportunity to escape his free fall by channeling Hamon through icicles that were knocked loose, creating a rope with Caesar's assistance. Cars survives the fall naturally and decides to cut his losses and pursue the group tomorrow. Jojo and crew meanwhile head to the abandoned hotel the Pillar Men are using as a base. While Caesar, Lisa, and Messina believe that attacking during the day would be the best option, Jojo disagrees, citing the fact that the Pillar Men have experience fighting during the day and will be more on guard as a result. Lisa, and Messina end up deferring to Jojo, but Caesar, frustrated by the lack of action, decides to face the Pillar Men by himself in order to avenge his family. Jojo is confused at Caesar bringing up his family at a time like this, and even wound up and even more wound up, Caesar attacks Jojo. Lisa explains that Jojo struck a nerve and reveals Caesar's past to Jojo. Caesar was raised by his father, Mario Zappelli, and idolized him, but one day Mario disappeared, and with no mother, Caesar began nursing resentment for his father. After a few arrests, Caesar became a feared gang leader in Rome, not the first blonde Italian teenager we'll see do that in this series. Until one day, he noticed Mario walking the streets. Wanting revenge on his father, Caesar followed only to discover the then petrified Pillar Men. Caesar touched one of the jewels embedded in the wall, but knowing this to be a trap, Mario pushed Caesar out of the way. As Mario was absorbed by the Pillar Men, he told Caesar that he must seek out Lisa and train in Hamon. Thus, with the revelation that Mario was protecting Caesar, the youngest Zappelli devoted himself to destroying evil. Meanwhile, in the present, Caesar approaches the hotel followed by Messina, when suddenly a seemingly invisible force cuts off Messina's arm and drags him into the hotel. Caesar deduces that this is Wammu, figuring out that Wammu is using his wind powers to wrap himself in a water vapor that is refracting the sunlight. Wammu reveals himself and says that he can tell Caesar is worthy enough to die by his hand. However, Caesar counters by displaying his new technique, the Hamon Bubble Cutter, which manages to do serious damage to Wammu. Wammu dives back into the hotel for cover, with Caesar pursuing him. The two trade blows, with Caesar making liberal use of the bubble cutter. Wammu is severely weakened by the assault, and for his finishing blow, Caesar reveals that he has hidden bubbles all over the battlefield, and that, thanks to the hole Wammu created, is using them as a series of magnifying glasses to direct the sunlight into Wammu. With Wammu on the brink of death, Caesar charges Wammu, but miscalculates as his body blocks the sunlight. With this opportunity, Wammu unleashes a point-blank divine sandstorm, knocking Caesar to the floor. Despite the fact that Caesar will soon die from blood loss, the Zeppeli presses on and continues to attack Wammu. Wammu tells Caesar to stop fighting and that the battle is over, but Caesar is able to grab Wammu's antidote ring for Jojo. Caesar places the ring around his bandana, saying that it is always destiny for his Zeppeli to sacrifice themselves for someone. With the last bit of his strength, Caesar creates a Hammon bubble out of his blood, letting loose a shout that rocks the building. Wammu briefly thinks about intercepting the bubble, but decides not to, honoring Caesar's last act as a warrior. Jojo and Lisa gotta get the second Lisa in there, enter the hotel and discover Caesar's bubble. Jojo and Lisa realize that Caesar is dead, crushed under some fallen ceiling, and while Lisa tries to play it cool, she ultimately breaks down at the death of her student. As the two mourn Caesar's death, Jojo swears to fight like the devil in order to bring down the Pillar Men. Jojo and Lisa continue to infiltrate the hotel, having a brief confrontation, it's a conversation and a confrontation, with a vampire before appearing in front of the Pillar Men and their 100 vampire army. Rather than the groups fighting now, Lisa proposes a wager. She explains that she did not bring the red stone of Aja with her, and that the stone is rigged to explode should she and Jojo not return too. However, Lisa promises to bring the stone to a one-on-one battle between Jojo and Wammu, while Lisa would face Cars. And whoever would succeed in those battles would gain the stone. The Pillar Men agree and settle on an ancient arena called Skeleton's Heel Stone, but keep Lisa as insurance while Jojo fetches the stone. Jojo brings back Messina to their base and fetches the stone with no bomb in sight. While snooping around Lisa's luggage, Jojo discovers mysterious pictures of a young Speedwagon, Arena, and Straitso holding a baby, along with a more recent picture of Arena. Jojo heads to the designated place and time. He hands the stone to Lisa, but also confronts her about the picture. Lisa explains that she was the baby Arena rescued from the boat when Dio attacked, but with Arena unable to raise two children, Arena asked Straitso to raise the young Lisa, who taught her the power of Hammon. Lisa says that she has extremely mixed feelings about Jojo killing Straitso, but Lisa also says that they need to talk later, as Jojo is about to face Wammu. Wammu lays out the rules of the fight, as the two will engage in an ancient form of combat, a chariot duel, using vampire horses. As Jojo prepares to face the Pillar Man, he wraps Caesar's headband around his head, saying that Caesar is fighting his battle with him as well, and that he will not drink the antidote till Wammu is dead, as a promise to Caesar. End of episodes.
A lot happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of plot bombshells in that one.
Surprisingly enough, it's like I remember I was like, I don't know where my brain cell went. Like
it's 3 episodes in a row, Emily. Come on. Yeah. So.
Brain cell.
Sorry.
Hand you the brain cell.
pass the brain cell. That's why it takes so long. Gotta send it through the post office. All right. So let's see. Why don't we get into it's the first time we really see Cars in combat, so why don't we talk about that for a little bit. I think it's pretty interesting that Cars is, we could sort of debate whether or not this is like actually like an element he controls, like AC/DC's heat or Wammu's wind, but I think it's interesting that Cars quote unquote controls light by sort of bending it with his blade, especially because the Pillar Men are so vulnerable to light. I think it's sort of, we always think about light as sort of a as like a godly or sort of divine sort of
Divine
symbol.
Sandstorm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Divine Sandstorm. That's all I said.
Yeah, exactly. Divine Sandstorm as well. But I think especially with Cars, who out of all the Pillar Men is the most motivated in sort of this goal of evolution, using the Redstone of Aja, using the mask to sort of ascend into godlyhood, and it's sort of like Kars's like ultimate. I guess if we were to boil down Kars's character to one word, Wammu is sort of honor and ACDC is sort of sadism. Then Kars is much like Dio is driven by like his ambition. He's gonna succeed. He's gonna, be an incredibly powerful force at all costs. And like the dude is willing to fall into like a giant cliff. Like Joseph says, like the distance of the top of the cliff to the bottom of the cliff is like taller than like the tallest skyscraper at the time. Like, I mean, Cars is just like he's gonna win at all costs.
I feel like when you said there, it's sort of like he controls light. I'm not sure if exactly you can say that he controls it. He sort of just uses, like, I don't even think he, like, uses it just, consciously. It's just because his chainsaw arms are so damn shiny.
Yeah, of course.
I still feel like that contributes to, like, him being like, yes, I am a god. I want to evolve to become the ultimate being. It's just, he already has this vibe of I know exactly what I'm doing and I can do it very elegantly. So he is sort of, because it's just shiny and refracting light and whatnot, it's more like I don't even have to try to be cool. I just am. I already am a god. I'm just trying to become more of a god.
I really like that actually. I think it almost sort of lends this idea that he is like pretending to be a god and pretending to be above. We've talked a lot about in this season breakdown of Joseph is a pretender. He is a person who fakes certain aspects of himself to gain the upper edge against his enemy. But with Cars, his sort of pretending to be, quote unquote, pretending to be a higher being or a god or what have you, is it's sort of like a dark inversion of Joseph, where like Joseph uses his pretending to help himself win in combat and sort of help others occasionally. Cars is it's really just for his self-confidence, essentially, for him to pretend to be this god. And that's just another thing that ties into his, feelings of ambition and his that being his drive.
Another thing that could contribute that, once again, back to the shiny chainsaw arms. It's like they're shiny, but once again, as you said, it can't really. The shiny doesn't really do anything. The chainsaw arms certainly do.
Yeah.
It's just like,
No, I mean,
trying to acquire a brain cell.
Yeah.
It's coming. It's
coming. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree. I think it's also interesting that he we've talked a fair amount about sort of the underlying theme of like technology versus nature that's going on here, and with the reintroduction of von Stroheim, who is sort of, I feel like von Stroheim is like the ultimate character embodiment of like technology. Like he is literally half technology. He's a Nazi, and the Nazis. Sorry.
a cyborg, and also because he's a Nazi, he's sort of portrayed as being, not a good person.
Yes.
So that's associating technology with not being a good person.
I mean, so like I definitely
And
want to
that,
get into that.
that's different.
Um, the one thing I was actually gonna say was sort of in relationship to his battle with Cars, where Cars is a Pillar Man. We sort of established that the Pillar Men are like symbols of nature or natural force, and like uh, von Stroheim initially being the symbol of technology, he in their fight stops Kars's attack with his metal hand, and he's like, barely scratched from that. And then Kars, what causes Kars to win the fight against von Stroheim is when he breaks out the chainsaw blade, which
It's not
obviously
natural.
I mean, if
It
we're
is, but
if we're being technical, it is natural, but it's a very unnatural image to see a chainsaw. I mean that's what it functions as.
it's trying to I'm coming up with something in my brain right now because I was writing down notes, and yesterday I didn't have any of that, and now I'm trying to formulate all of it right now. And I kind of get the vibe that once again, Cars might not be the best. Sure, what the word is. Symbol be used for G versus nature. I feel like definitely Santana fit that incredibly well, and ACDC and Wammu didn't really. They kind of did a little bit, but not really. And then Cars is I'm trying to. Okay, I had something and then it was gone. It was like he is still using technology of sorts to further himself, because the stone mask is technically a type of technology. All of this kind of all of his experimenting and his creation, that's all technically part of what I originally said that they seemed to be fighting against, which they kind of are, but they're just doing it in a different way. I guess this is just another lovely gray area, something that exists so much in part two, which I love. It's always not I guess a positive and a negative about each character. None of them are entirely good or entirely bad, but also none of them are entirely in their own themes, and none. It's just it's like von Stroheim. He's like, yes, I respect bravery and whatnot and human greatness, but he's also like Nazi. And then you also got Cars, who's like, I just said stuff about that. No, I don't know. I had a thought and it went away. And you got Joseph. What were you gonna say?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you definitely had something there.
I'm just not able to talk today.
It's all good. Um, I'm just gonna let you had something about Joseph, right?
It almost did.
You almost did. Okay.
Almost did. I thought of something and then the words left me
All
to
right.
prepare myself better.
Well, so I guess I can try and expand on a couple of the things that you've said right now. If it comes to you, feel free to interrupt me. But yeah. So let's see. Yeah. So no one character. We talked about the gray area. We talked about and how that is sort of affecting what these characters represent as symbols in and of themselves. I think that I would say that some characters are like that more than others. I think Cars, in terms of being a symbol, is definitely the most compromised that we've seen so far. In terms of, I mean, he's a pillar man, and we sort of established with the Santana scene and stuff like that that the pillar men collectively are natural forces. But so far, the Pillarmen we've seen right now, Santana is his thing is curiosity, ACDC it's sadism, Wammu it's honor, and Cars we've sort of settled on ambition, but he doesn't fit that quite as cleanly as say Wammu fits honor. Um, and tying that in with Joseph, because I mean we're obviously going to get into it in the remaining battle tendency discussions, but the ultimate battle is it's gonna come down to Cars versus Joseph, and it sort of makes me think. So we have two characters who are probably the most compromising we've seen, compromising to themselves rather, that we've seen in Battle Tendency and really the whole series in general. And that's what the ultimate fight comes down to, is these two characters who sort of don't quite fit in with other characters in the way they've been established, and the sort of central theme that is pertinent to those side characters. And I think the Pillarman's ultimate goal is to ascend to godlyhood and to be gods, evolve, etc. And I think sort of like this compromise and this sort of not quite fitting in it's almost like a very human thing. I mean, you think about von Stroheim, who is like full on technology. He has like some respect for bravery and things like that, but mostly he's just like German science, man, like that's my thing. And von Stroheim is not like fully human. We think about Caesar, and we think about how Caesar is so devoted to family, yet he dies because of Wammu. And it's at the end of Battle Tendency, the final fight, it's ultimately the characters who really do not symbolically fit into a situation that make it out the best or make it out okay. Which sort of makes me think that the show is telling us something, that we need to be flexible, or we need to, like not always go with the grain. At least that's my interpretation of that.
Yeah, that's a hella point right there, which sort of goes into what I originally thought, but I didn't just like have words for it. Or sort of like one should not devote themselves entirely to a cause. It's like it's normally the kind of thing that you think of that you should do, but at the same time, can't just, people generally just don't do that. They generally don't want to, and if they do, it often leads to self-destruction. Like if you only dedicate your life to one thing, it might sound good, but in the end, you're probably not going to enjoy it because you can't just do one thing all the time. Which is sort of bullshit in here, but the other thing was it can't just be technology versus nature. And what I mean by that is, and people, especially now, in like environmentalism debates and whatnot, where some people are like, let's just get rid of all of it and go back to nature. Nobody actually wants to do that, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's
I mean,
just
I don't
like,
want to do
okay,
that.
I don't want to do that either, but at the same time, it's like, but I don't want to destroy forests. That's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like showing the fact that they don't entirely fit into each theme, respectively. It's almost showing that, once again, that's not a realistic sort of thing to happen. Like, there's a lot of like stories out there, like the Lorax TM, and even like that, even back to Dr. Stone a little bit. It's either have it or you don't, and that's generally not how it works. The side of the good in Dr. Stone, the Science Kingdom. Oh yes, Kingdom of Science. Love that for them. they blend sort of nature and technology together. They're very much aware that you need both and that you can't destroy nature to have technology. But the other side that they are fighting against is the opposite of that. They believe that no technology is the ideal. But our boy Senku here has discovered that that is not the case. So basically, people now they fight for stuff like, oh, let's just not have fossil fuels. And I feel like the fact that we're doing a deep cut here, okay? All that kind of stuff. It's like nobody wants to actually, and it's not telling us to actually get rid of technology like most of these stories tell. It's like, oh, the only thing that you can do is just get rid of all of it. But this is more of a realistic example where it's like, ah, yes, our boy Cars may be sort of a symbol of nature. He could shapeshift later on, make its hand into a squirrel, and I can fly now. Yeah. For some reason, control piranhas. Who knows why? Despite all of that, and then despite, Santana's obvious connections with, like, being a symbol of nature, it's like at the same time, that's just not a thing that's going to happen. And even with Joseph, he's not like, he's not like Stroheim, who's just like German science is the best in the world. He's literally just vibing, and I'm pretty sure he's probably neutral on the subject. So,
yeah, I mean, he's sort of got he's almost got like the balance if you think about it, because like Hamon is like a natural force, and
I forgot about Haman. Jesus.
but he also uses like man-made things. Like he uses the clackers. Later on in the series, this man is famous for crashing planes, but like he still knows how to fly planes and use guns and stuff like that. So he really is like this balance of nature and technology that we're sort of talking about.
Card almost is that balance too. He's like slightly geared towards nature a little bit, but even then, he's not entirely supposed to be nature,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that makes JoJo Part 2 so difficult for me to talk about. Because one, it's just very, very gray, and two, some of the writing isn't the best. Oftentimes it is pretty good, but sometimes it's not. That just makes it hard. But we're gonna vibe. We'll
Yeah,
do it.
I mean, if you're listening to this, well, first off, thank you. But it should be noted that like we are giving ourselves a challenge by
This is
analyzing this
hard.
series in such a way.
This is
Uh,
difficult.
yeah, I mean, definitely a show that we're supposed to be entertaining. But anyway, let's get into more deep discussion now that we've sort of put egg on our face. So
Okay.
I kind of want
I
to.
feel like
No, go
what?
ahead.
It's like I feel like we should talk about like the big thing that happens. Basically, just Caesar TM.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Fantastic. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, so you brought it up. Why don't you start with that?
Okay, let me consult my less than one page of notes because I didn't feel like we'd have a whole lot to talk about. Wait, where's she at?
I feel like that's like sort of a common thing whenever we do this. Is like, yeah, I don't know, like how much we're gonna be able to talk about, and then like we fill the hour easily. Like,
because it's because like the brain cell bounces between the two of us, where it's like one thought bounces off of another, and then suddenly galaxy brain happens, whether you think it will or not. And sometimes it doesn't happen, but that's fine.
it's true.
Fine. Because JoJo, why I didn't realize that JoJo Part 2 would be like so hard to analyze and find. Part 1 was fun. I actually enjoyed the hell out of analyzing Part 1 because it was like it was easier. That like there was a lot. It was some of it wasn't, but I feel like there was more there in some points. It was less gray, but it was still gray.
I
It
feel like we'll
wasn't
have an
what.
easier time when we get to Stardust Crusaders.
Oh, You
But
have words about Stardust Crusaders.
but
That's
anyway, let's talk about
okay.
Caesar for now.
About Caesar. All right. I feel like when that big fight between the two of them and Joseph is something probably the most interesting thing to me that happens in these 3 episodes is when Joseph says, "Family that you never knew who died for some purpose that you barely even know about doesn't mean anything."
Yeah.
It shows a very big difference between the two of them. Honestly, I straight up be agreeing with my boy Joseph here. Like, Caesar, what are you doing? You died because you were too dedicated to some dude you didn't even know. And it's like fine because it was like the right thing to do, I guess, but at the same time, no, he was so dedicated that he just couldn't sit still and went and got himself killed. Joseph was like, hold up. I'm not like super emotionally attached to this, and I don't think we should be because we're trying to save the world. So relax, chill, bro." So
It
they
so
they they discuss it like men, and then other.
yeah. So I actually had a really interesting thought when I was watching these episodes. I,
Oh,
I was sort of wondering, like, is the fact that is Joseph's character arc that he goes through in Battle Tendency actually a bad thing? Because so that scene that you brought up, I think, is super important, where he's talking about like why do you feel attached here to a bunch of family that you never knew, things like that, and we've sort of seen that this is a consistent element of what Joseph thinks. Like, he cares about his immediate family, Arena and Smokey and all those characters, but he's not really concerned with legacy. Um, but and I know I just said we'll talk about Stardust Crusaders later, but I'm gonna bring up Stardust Crusaders now. When we get to
dare you?
when we get to part 3, Joseph's arc is basically all about how he is motivated to fight Dio, who is a villain from the Joestar's legacy, and he's motivated to fight Dio because Jonathan could not kill Dio. So Joseph ends up being motivated by the exact same sort of thing that Caesar does. Um, and even after Caesar dies, I believe, when Joseph is taking Messina back to the hotel that the Joe Bros are staying at, he sort of thinks like, I used to be all about myself, but like, I never cared about the family legacy and things like that. But now that Caesar's dead, and he's like thinking about it more, and like that sort of, I mean, he's been pretty good up until now, but like now that he's sort of thinking more and more about family and legacy and what that all means. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be some consequences to that in part 3, and just sort of makes me think that maybe we're seeing a character arc from Joseph, but the character arc is sort of saying that he is like worsening as a person, perhaps.
That is an incredibly interesting thing to bring up. I did not think of that, but now I have 2 other thoughts because of that. It's just the good stuff. It's the ricocheting. That one scene.
The brain cell ricochet.
I love so much, but we're gonna get into that later. Thought of 2 things when you said that. One, either he did indeed, negatively develop, I guess. At the same time, they never really showed that happening. And
Right.
we know how part 3 is, right? The plot is absolute bullshit. I honestly feel like this is probably you had what you said right there. It was a very, very interesting point. I kind of vibe with the idea that he developed negatively, but at the same time, like the jump and the fact that it was never really, nothing was ever really said about it, and just the fact that Joseph is the kind of person that he is in part two, I almost feel like just like the jump and like the difference is might just straight up be bad writing, because of part three just has a history of having plot elements that don't make any sense at all. Like literally the I have so many words about
Yeah.
part three. The plot characters in part three, they're great. I enjoy them. They're not the best, but they're good. We have some very very good characters in part three, and then there's some that are like okay, and then but they're all like pretty good. But the plot literally doesn't make it's just, like, there's so many things that are just so bad about the plot in part three. It's so painful.
what? What? So, I, I'm trying to save it. Hold on.
I was laughing.
So, yeah. So, again, we sort of feel like we do this every episode, but we don't want to get too far into Stardust Crusaders. We definitely want to save that for when we do the Stardust Crusaders breakdown.
Wanted to say that that might just be bad writing.
Yeah.
Because of part three's track record.
Maybe. I mean, I think the one thing that sort of goes against my, theory, if you want to call it, is that it's never really framed as a negative thing.
Is another thing.
It's just like you have to do a couple extra steps to like make the connection. I will say, I have a couple things related to that sort of negative development and my big old toxic masculinity theory.
Favorite. You know I love that theory, Thomas.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not overwhelming, but I do think it is significant. So, talking about Caesar's backstory, where Mario, much like William, abandoned his family to go and fight evil. But and they the characters sort of frame that as like, oh, he did it for his children, he did it for these noble reasons, and there is truth to that. I mean, regardless of what you think about like the morality of what they did, I think it's fair to say that both William and Mario were motivated by good intentions. But that being said, I think like you think about like the logistics around, especially Mario leaving his family. Like no explanation to Caesar, who is like the oldest child. Just like the dude just like goes away, and then like once Lisa explains all this to JoJo's like, oh, like I'm. He doesn't say it directly to Caesar, but he says like, I'm sorry, Caesar. Like I didn't know all this. Like it sounds like Mario is a good man, and it's sort of like this like almost rewarding thing for the way Mario acts. And that obviously Mario is not a character that we spend a particularly long time with, but it's just sort of a like, we're gonna honor this guy's behavior, even though it feels like there are a lot of things that Mario could have done to at least explain the situation, or like somehow take care of his kids so that Caesar doesn't become like a gang leader in Rome. And it's just kind of like what's the word, like a validation of that behavior by saying like, oh, Mario was like a good guy all along.
That's another interesting thing to bring up that I could possibly say something about. Oh, to Legacy for the hottest of minutes. We got Caesar, who is so dedicated to his legacy because he was like, oh, my dad actually didn't. Well, he did abandon him. That's my point. He abandoned him still. What it still like baffles me how like despite the fact that he did that to quote unquote protect his family, even though it's he could have definitely made an effort to still be there. Like he could have possibly even done both. I mean, I'm not. I don't see how he couldn't have. Honesty. Okay. Um. So it's so interesting to see how like the Zeppelis generally like Mario and William abandoned Mario and Mario abandoned Caesar for this grand purpose. And for some reason, that cycle continues, even though it proved to never be a good outcome for anybody. And it just confuses me why Caesar would be so dedicated to such a thing. I mean, he did discover that was doing it to protect the world, but at the same time, I feel like if I were Caesar, I'd still be kind of pissed at him for literally abandoning his family and leaving a bunch of children to fend for themselves. Like, despite the fact that what he was doing was protecting the world, I feel like he still could have at least also protected his children.
Yeah, or just like like even if he couldn't, just like leave a note or something,
Yeah, at least please
like.
tell them I'm doing something for the good of humanity and I still love you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Like I mean,
No, then you just let Caesar have daddy issues for several years.
and I think that it's like it's God, I'm confusing my own theory, but I think this is a smart idea worth expanding upon. Um, so they sort of bring up this fact that like all the Zapellis like die for this, like die to fight evil or what have you, um, and it almost makes me wonder like is this sort of like I mean we're not so in case you guys missed the first couple episodes or forgot what we brought up in those episodes, my big toxic masculinity theory is that the first three parts of JoJo are all about displaying like examples of toxic masculinity, and the parts 4, 5, and 6 are all about deconstructing that. But it makes me wonder if they're sort of diving into that deconstruction a little bit early by saying that all the Zapellis who do these shitty things like leave their families and stuff like that also happen to die, whereas I mean we see it less with Joseph in Battle Tendency, but we will see it in Stardust Crusaders. And you compare that with the Joestars, who always make an effort, for the most part, for their family, as we see in parts 1, 2, and 3. I want to stress, we see the Joestars make an effort to they're family oriented, but they don't abandon their family. Again, parts 1, 2, and 3. Part 4, things are going to change in that aspect, but yeah, so it makes me wonder, like, within this first half of the series, that that is sort of being like like that's the difference between the Joestars and the Zapellis, is that the Zapellis are sort of like we said in the beginning, actually, devoted solely to the destruction of evil and things like that, whereas the Joestars are, I mean, they want to save the world, stop evil, do all that stuff, but they also care about their family and care about their friends just as much as they care about stopping the bad guy and saving the day.
That's, I could also bounce off that point onto another one based on that point. My signature move, the secret Winkles technique, as I like to call it. Okay. I spent too much time being silly. Okay, 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 okay. I literally forgot what I was gonna do. Oh wait, okay, I got it.
Okay, go.
Got it. So you got our boys, the Joestars, as you said, being being as dedicated to their families as they are with help making the world a better place, and the Zeppelis being like significantly less dedicated to their families and more dedicated to the good of the world. I feel like Jonathan could almost be considered someone more similar to a Zeppeli than a Joestar because he does it's probably like not the best argument to make because he was, going to be dedicated to his family, but then Dia was like, no, you're gonna die right now. I feel like this, does bring up a point where the fact that it almost like as you watch JoJo and as you start to like get into it, and especially when you finish it, you start almost like because of the fact that Jonathan is only in one part because he is like he dies pretty young, and just as all of the Zeppelis did, they all died pretty young, leaving their family with nothing, with no memories of them, barely at all, because they were gone so quickly. I feel like it almost seems that the effect that Jonathan has on the rest of the series is almost showing the effect of what William and Mario had on Caesar and the rest of the many Zeppeli children, because I knew like Caesar had like 4 siblings or something. I don't know. Because it's an interesting thing that I've been thinking about for a while that may or may not contribute into one of my theories. We all have our own big theories that we're gonna do whole videos on, which is very exciting. So it always seems that because Jonathan was only in part 1, he actually, and that like none of his family ever even really met him. Like his own son did not know him at all, especially his grandson did not know him. It always seemed like, despite the fact that the plot started with Jonathan, it seemed like it all truly started with Joseph because he actually lived to meet future generations and to like tell the tale of that one time he defeated a bunch of I don't even know how to describe them.
Bunch of Aztec strippers.
A bunch of Aztec stripper gods. So because of the fact that he's like in part 2, but he's also in parts 3 and 4, it almost seems like that's where it all started from. It sort of gives that, despite that not being the case, it gives that impression because he was there through most of it. He was Jonathan, what he did affected what would happen to, family members later on because of Dio, but at the same time, Joseph had more of an effect on it because he was actually there and sometimes not there, but eventually there for his family. He, went on a big road trip with Jotaro and they had some funky times, I'll tell you. Then eventually he met his bastard son and became a part of his life, so that was good.
Yeah.
And so that's, do you get what I'm saying there?
I do get what you're saying. I think I guess another common theme in these episodes is I'm gonna try and summarize and just tell me if I'm wrong. So
it's your secret technique.
The power to summarize.
I say something based on something that you said, and it's very like all over the place, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna summarize it, and I'm like, good, because I can't summarize what I just said.
So from again, what it sounds like to me is like, so we've talked a bit about how Jonathan and Dio's confrontation is always framed as this legendary, big, sort of a world-shaking event. And part of that is sort of that Jonathan dies, that it becomes this sort of legend. But the fact that Joseph is alive, and especially the fact that Joseph is a very goofy dude, sort of demystifies his adventures, and as a result, the Joestars, in parts 1, 2, and 3 can sort of afford to have a part family focus where you know they don't have to live up to the legacy because they can see the legacy, and the legacy is a slightly racist, but well-meaning goofy guy. Like he's not a legendary figure,
I mean, I feel like he could be, but it's like one thing that was sort of like a missed opportunity was like not even sure if like Jotaro ever knew about the wacky things that he did when he was a youngin. Like, ever tell him that? I would hope so. I would think so.
I mean,
it was kind of like a major event in his life.
Well, that's actually a good question that I don't have the answer to.
No, of course we don't. Only Araki knows.
I mean, I could imagine that Joseph probably told Holly, and then Holly told Jotaro, but I don't think.
It'd be so cool if we actually got to see that.
Just imagine like young Jotaro just like freaking out that like his grandpa did all this crazy stuff.
At the same time, it would be funny, but it would also like add to the emotional effect so much more. It already sort of adds to it because, the person who was reading or watching it is already like, oh my god, that guy did so many cool things, and he's like still vibing, especially when that, I don't know, I shouldn't talk about there's that scene in part 4 where it's like, wow, he's old now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Doesn't know anything, and Josuke doesn't know about all of the wacky shit that he has done. Very cool things that he has done as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just say one thing and then bring it back to battle tendency. But I definitely do think that is intentional, that Josuke is sort of unknowing of his heritage. But okay.
Normally he wouldn't be, because he's kind of like,
Yeah.
Or of a one-night stand.
Right.
And then never, hey, get it one-night stand.
Oh my gosh. God damn it, Emily.
Just comic relief, okay? This is what I was born to do.
No, that was good. Well, speaking of comic relief, do you want to talk about the silly stuff?
I have that's what I was excited about, because I didn't have any, like, we had a couple of, like, brain cell moments, but, like, I was just laughing when I was watching them. I watched, once again, going back from sub to dub, both of which have very, very iconic moments, but I absolutely love, I forgot his name again, who plays Joseph in the dub. Like, the way
Ben Diskin, I believe.
Yes. Literally just like opens up the episode screaming, "Hey, rifle heads, what's a guy gotta do to get some food around here?" And just like the way he says it is just so like, so much bastard in the tone. And I very much appreciated it. And then he's just like being silly as like Cars is just murdering a bunch of Nazis and Stroheim is there, and he's oh yeah, then there's Joseph going on that silly monologue about how Stroheim is a bastard Nazi who struts around like he's better than everyone else, but he still says, "I am a bit happy." He was that.
To me,
they had a major bro moment back, not too long ago.
For sure, yeah. I can't remember what von Stroheim says, but he digs him about that a little bit. He's like, "Don't cry that I'm back," To me, the most iconic moment is obviously Pinball Cars
Oh my
Um,
god, that is literally my favorite scene in the entirety of JoJo thus far.
which is, I mean, I feel like that's like a really, like, if it wasn't like the specific way in which he like bounces around, I feel like that would be a really sort of symbolically significant scene. But just as it is, just the image of deadpan cars and him just like bouncing the hell around this like cliff is just so funny to me.
Okay, I'm gonna do a whole breakdown because I remember like a few weeks ago, I like texted the group chat and I was like, okay, my favorite jokes of all time, and then I went into a breakdown of exactly why. I think it was like forgot what scene it was. I think I did like this. I did a whole breakdown of why a certain joke from BoJack Horseman was like one of my favorite jokes of all time, and I went on like this whole tangent on why it was good. Like went in depth. I'm gonna do that right now. So it's not gonna be nearly as good though. Because this is like that was like a there was words there. There's no words here. So you got cars. He's falling down a cliff, right? Like literally, normally a person would die, but he's just completely deadpan. He knows he's fine. He sees some flowers down there. This is like that one time when he didn't kill a dog. He doesn't want to kill the flowers either. That's just another example of that happening. So he's like, I don't want to hit these flowers, but he doesn't say anything. He's just deadpan, and then he just like reaches up his arm and then just like elbows the wall really hard. I love the sound effects that they use because it's so incredibly loud.
Very crunchy sound effects.
It's very crunchy and very much sounds more like construction work happening, like someone bouncing around. Because he literally like is harder than the stone that he's hitting. That sounds bad. Okay, so he just elbows the wall and then just bounces around incredibly loudly, like several times, ricocheting off the walls and off the ground until he finally slams into the ground, stands up, still deadpan, and just looks at the flowers that he didn't crush. And not to mention, he starts like laughing hysterically.
Yeah, that's
a couple of seconds later, and then immediately stops to be deadpan again.
Yeah, it's just so funny.
I remember the first time I saw that like a year ago, I was like, I had to pause it. I watched it like 5 times. I like rewatched it 5 times because it was just so funny.
Oh, it's great.
I also love the dub, once again, Stroheim in the Arnold Schwarzenegger voice. I'm going to pluck you like a chicken.
That's great.
So he said, I am not merely human, I am more, as a machine gun just emerges from him.
Yeah, Machine Gun von Stroheim is hilarious.
Not to mention another underrated moment in the dub is where Cars is running at Stroheim, like attack him, and Stroheim isn't moving. All he says is, here he comes, here he comes, here he comes, here he comes, here he comes. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing?
Oh,
it's just so dumb.
There's some pretty funny, like bad English in these episodes as well.
Oh, please.
I forget what it is specifically, but so it's like when Caesar is like pulling up JoJo from the icicle rope, and he says something like,
oh,
he's like, nice work, Caesar-chan, or something like that, and it's like, wow. And especially the translation, which is something like it's something in Italian actually, and it's like Caesarino is what he calls Caesar. It's like both of those are just perfection.
Oh boy, I love the English.
It's so good.
Okay. I have any other things? Oh yeah. One thing that I loved was when they were that random vampire that Lisa and Joseph fought. That scene had so much in it. But we had Yo-Yo Master over here, and that guy calls it. He's like, "What do you got?" Like the clacker volleys. He's like, "Is that a yo-yo?" And all I could think about was, but the Yo-Yo Master did not answer. He just kept on yoing. And to mention when like Lisa like did something cool, like was just being a queen as usual. And then this creature before her says, "I don't like how stuck up feet treat me like that." And I was like, "Oh my god, this vampire's an incel."
He really is.
And that was just like I like cringed.
The thing that always like weirds me out about this particular vampire is that like, all right, so like he shows off that like he's got like spikes that he can like, you know, shoot out of him, but like for some reason his hair disappears when the spike comes out, and it's like, what the hell? Oh man!
That I also appreciate is when the lovely like background music for when Joseph found out that Lisa was 50, and he was just like, "If you were a baby 50 years ago, you're 50," and then he was like, and he's just like, "You're old," and he was just like deadpan.
Yeah, it's so great. And then like especially when he's like a little bit after that where he's like looking around her and he's like, "Oh, do I see a wrinkle there?" And she like glares at him. It's like
Another like thing that I found, like I don't think it was intended to be funny in that same scene where Joseph like hands Lisa the pictures that he took and like wanted an explanation. He didn't say anything. He just looked down at her with this like very specific face that looked very like an expectant child. He literally was. I don't know how to describe like, way his face was drawn there, but he didn't. It wasn't angry. It was like a 2-year-old who wanted something. Then she was just like, "Oh, you want an explanation?" He's like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
The vibe I got from that scene, and I don't know why, but I just thought it was really funny.
Oh man.
All of this stuff is like I don't know why it was funny. It just was.
No, I mean there's a lot there's a lot of examples of that in this whole series. I feel like it's accidental funny stuff.
Another one. I have several more.
Okay.
Actually. I just realized that. So we got in the dub there was this glorious moment once again back at the beginning scene where British accent fails terribly, and it like becomes like this entirely other accent when he says, "Was this in my horoscope?" It was like it turned into this. I don't know how to describe what kind of accent it was, but it just like immediately switched off into something else, and I just did not understand it. I was just, oh no, it was good. Also, like they literally. Have you ever seen Rebels Without a Cause?
I have not.
Oh, there's a scene in that movie, right? They have this. I watched it in like a class in high school, and I remember it was a very intense scene that, because of bad special effects, made us all laugh our asses off. So it's very similar to what Cars and Joseph did when they were going after the stone. So the whole challenge is that these two dudes were like, "Yo, I gotta prove how manly I am to you, so let us like do a trial of death. So let's get in our cars, you in your car and me in my car. We're going to drive as fast as we can towards this cliff, and whoever jumps out of the car first is a chicken." And they called it the Chickie Run, and I just kept thinking about that when I was watching that scene. That's literally what they were doing. The best part about that scene in the movie is that like our main protagonist was in that thing, and there was like this guy that was mean to him that was doing it. So the protagonist jumps out of the car right before to literally this rocky, watery grave off a cliff. He jumps out, he survives, but his adversary over here was actually going to jump out before he was, but like his car door jammed and he couldn't get it open, so he flew off. And this is where the bad special effects came in. It was like this movie was made in the 50s, so the special effects, just imagine that. It was bad. The car just exploded at the bottom of the cliff, and it looked really, really unrealistic and bad. And all of us, at this guy dying, just started laughing our asses off. The effects were so bad.
Same energy as the car's pinball.
Yes.
Oh
It
man.
literally, when Cars and Joseph were going after the stone, they were like, I can't stop. I'm about to run off this cliff.
All right.
It was just the thing. That was the thing it reminded me of.
No, that's good. Any other last minute silly things you want to talk about?
You know what? I don't think I have one.
All right. So, with all that said, this is beefer of an episode. Not as beefery as the last episode we did, but still kind of a beefer. So, if you want to continue reading and listening to all the silly and sometimes occasionally serious stuff, I have to say you can follow me on Twitter at Thomas M. Brickman. I also do another podcast where me and my buddy Kev break down video game news, do reviews, and a couple of silly segments. Our next episode is actually going to be sort of a multiplayer psychoanalysis sort of a thing. So
That sounds funky.
yeah, you definitely want to check out that episode. You can find it here on YouTube. It's post game content. Or you can always keep up with updates on Twitter at PostGameCon. That's at PostGameCon. And Emily has social media too. It's at Emily Vinkles on Twitter.
You're doing it for me because I kept forgetting to do it.
And if you want to keep up with all the news, the awesome memes that Emily finds and makes for this podcast, you can follow the podcast social media. That's at iwanttofightar1 on Twitter and iwanttofightaraki on Instagram. And we'll see you guys next time for we got only 2 episodes to watch next time. It's going to be season 1, episodes 22 and 23, Battle Tendency episodes 13 and 14. And with all that said, we'll see you guys next time.